You are listening to Rooted, the podcast, and this is Kevin Hu. Before we jump into this week's episode, however, I need your help with something. October is Clergy Appreciation Month, in case you didn't know. And the second Sunday of October is Pastor's Appreciation Day. And I would just love to be able to compile a ton of stories. It can be snippets or a few paragraphs even, of just how people have been blessed and their lives have been changed by those who have been leading and shepherding in ministry. So if you've got a story of how a pastor has changed your life, or a youth group leader, a small group leader, just anybody who would be categorized under clergy, if you could go to our website with that, click on rootedministries.co, right? Go through that, click on appreciation. You'll have this space where you can even fill it out anonymously and just write in a short story that you just want to affirm and encourage pastors with. And then our goal will be to take these stories and these snippets and push them out through our Facebook group, our podcast, our different social media channels. So hopefully that all month long, pastors will be reminded that they are making an impact, that they are appreciated, that God continues to use them powerfully for his ministry. And so if you could do that, again, rootedministries.co, click on appreciation, and just share your heart. I'd really appreciate that. And I know pastors all over the country would appreciate that as well. All right, on to this week's episode. So Pastor Mack, last week we were talking with JKB about trust. And what do we do when we don't trust anyone as pastors? And we built off of these stats that we found recently through the Barna studies, which was two kind of statistics that we felt like contradicted with each other. One was that I think it was like year over year, pastors are seeking less and less counseling, spiritual direction, mentoring, and so forth, okay? Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, there's this other stat that's gone up year over year, which is pastors feel more lonely now than ever. And it just seems very interesting to me. As pastors, I know enough, I've heard enough, I've walked with enough individuals to know that, yes, being a pastor can be very lonely, but it just seems very odd. You'd think that if you're feeling more and more lonely, you want to make connections with people. And so there seems to be this challenge. And right before we started recording today, you brought up this phrase, the pastor's island, or the pastoral island. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I was thinking earlier that you sent those stats out to the team last week, and I was thinking to myself, the very thought that you had to make, man, this is, first of all, these numbers are, they make you really sad, but they also make a lot of sense because, for a myriad of reasons, pastors won't seek counsel, whether they get too busy or there's shame attached, and shame says, hey, you don't need to do that because if you are seeking out outside counsel, then maybe you don't have everything that you need in order to be a pastor, which, let me say parenthetically, is a huge lie from the pit of hell because we need Jesus and therapy and spiritual direction and aspirin and all the things at any given time. It's just because of the nature of the work that God has called us to. So, yeah, you do see this decrease in pastors who are seeking less counsel. But then you also have pastors who are also feeling extremely lonely. And that's for a myriad of reasons. You've got power dynamics at play. Again, shame can be at play if I am quote unquote struggling in a particular area, or maybe just having a bad day. Then who do I share that with, right? And who can I share that with in an honest and authentic way, so that I can continue to move forward. And then, again, I'm gonna just be honest. Sometimes really bad theology tells us that we take it to the Lord in prayer and leave it at the feet of Jesus. And, if you need anything more than Jesus, then it's somehow sinful, right? And so I think when you put all of that stuff together, those stats actually make a whole lot of sense. And it can leave a pastor on this island where he is alone by himself. And you said something that I thought was really, really beautiful for the illustration, is that on this island is just you and the ministry, right? But you're on one side of the island, the ministry's on the other side of the island. And maybe you want to put your family on some other part of it, but you're just alone, occupying the space that you hold as a husband, as a father, and as a leader. And so, or as a wife, excuse me. So I think that it's really, really important for us not to find ourselves on pastoral island. I was sharing with a dear friend of mine over the weekend, and he said, Mac, I recognize that I'm now pastoring a church that is not connected to a denomination. He said, and outside of you and one of our other friends, I don't really talk to a whole lot of people. The church doesn't have an association. I don't really have an association. I don't like playing the political games. And so he said, I know I have to be careful because if I'm not, I will find myself on this island by myself. And it'll just be me, the church, and my wife. And I know that that's not healthy. So Pastoral Island is that place that I think shame creates, that I believe bad theology creates, that I believe busyness creates. And next thing you know, you look up and you're just kind of there, wondering how you got there and feeling like many of these leaders have reported in those stats that you gave us.
So so help me clarify then when we talk about the pastor's island, because there's another part that you and I talked about briefly before. Again, we hit record, which is
the best conversations happen before we hit record.
I know we should start recording beforehand next time. We'll give you the BTS right here.
Right.
No, but there is a reality too, and this is true for therapists and counselors, and I do believe of pastors as I've gotten older, that there is an appropriate amount of sharing. There's like a discernment on our part as leaders of the church, as the under shepherds of the flock, on how much we share. And I hate that is true, if I'm honest, because I think starting out, I'm like, no, I'm going to give the congregation 100% of me, and I want them to know every inch of what's going on in my life, and that's authentic leadership, and that's how you build authenticity. But in the kind of traditional church setting where the preacher is usually the one up there on Sundays, and there's not a lot of life being done the other 6 days a week with the preacher, right, one-on-one, to hear that every week on a Sunday, for some people, it's distracting. They don't know what to do with it. They may not be emotionally or spiritually mature enough to even handle that and take it the wrong way because they're not in this active dialogue or they're not in fellowship with that person. So I think I've seen it fall out enough where I go, okay, there's wisdom to why people have shared that with me for many years, right? But to me, I go, isn't that an island, though? It's like an appropriate island to be on. And if that's the case, then given what you just shared of like, okay, you don't want to be isolated on this island. Then what do you do? And sorry, before I forget, that is part one. This is a lot. That's part one. What do you do? But I'm also curious, like how this pastor even realized that you shared.
Yeah.
Right?
So,
like, how do we realize we're on an island?
Yeah. So let me push back just a little bit. I wouldn't call that an island. I would call that a boundary.
Okay.
I would call that a boundary. And I do think that because of the power dynamic that is present between pastor and lay leaders and parishioners, that there should be certain boundaries, right? But I'm going to give you an example of where I think you can not necessarily breach the boundary, but open up the wall just a little bit to let the pastor and the people, both pastor and people, know that we're in this together. Maybe about 15 years ago, I was serving a pastor. I was the associate pastor at a predominantly African-American mega church in Kentucky. And my pastor's sister had just died. And she died right before the leadership retreat that we were all scheduled to be on. And we all of us knew that he was not going to cancel the leadership retreat. And so we all gathered at the retreat spot, and the pastor got up to give his opening statements, and he stood at the podium silent for a moment, and he said, as many of you know, my sister just died last night. He said, and I'm going to be honest with y'all, I don't want to be here right now. And in that moment, he started to weep, but dude, all of us wept with him.
Wow.
Like all of us wept with him. And I remember thinking that evening, that was probably the first time I've seen pastoral leadership that raw and that honest with lay leaders, associate pastors, because we're taught that the pastor is supposed to be the authority in scripture, the authority in life, and somehow or another, the authority in emotions, right? And so, they you are, brother, sister, pastor, the strong ones, right? That we're supposed to come to, and you're not supposed to leak, and you're not supposed to let emotions come out. You're supposed to be the one that, you're supposed to be the shoulders that we cry on, right? Yeah. But in that moment, I felt like what Pastor Gaines shared with us was both a very pastoral moment and a very human moment, and that he was both, that he is our pastoral leader, right? He is our shepherd. But he's also a man who lost his sister. He's also a brother who lost his sister. And he knows how that feels. He knows how that feels for his mother. And he was in Kentucky, and the rest of his family was in Tennessee, so he couldn't even grieve with his family together. And so I share that to say this. I do think that there needs to be certain boundaries that pastors need to have, because you are absolutely right. Everybody can't handle everything. And to be honest, just keeping it 100, I don't trust everybody with my business and my emotions, and to steward those well, right? And so there has to be natural boundaries. But I also think that there's a space where leaders can be authentic and say, hey, y'all, I'm just not in a good space right now. I still love Jesus and I still love y'all, but I'm not good. And to base off your relationship that you have with your congregation, because I think a pastor knows, you use wisdom on how much you let people in. But I think it's kind of foolish sometimes to shut people completely out. Like when you are intentionally shutting people out, that's when it becomes an island, right?
There you go. Okay.
But I think that there's a difference between an island and a boundary, because boundaries acknowledge and honor the power dynamics that are available, that are present, when you're leading. But if I want to establish and solidify a culture of authenticity and support, then every now and then, I'll have to pull back the curtain and let people see behind the veil that, like, hey, everything's not necessarily great. I won't go into detail, but I would appreciate it if you all would pray with me.
Yeah. All right. So then walk me through this next part. So I appreciate the clarification, the correction. So in the process of trying to establish, figure out, discern what the healthy boundaries are, how do we guard ourselves then in between the spaces of trying to create healthy boundaries to finding ourselves on that island? Because I think for a lot of us who haven't had parental figures, mentors, or pastors who've modeled that appropriate level of authenticity, kind of like what the experiences that you had, who maybe the only models they had was the pastor who did put out this kind of like mask of, I am perfect. You're not going to know anything about my marriage, my family, my parenting. And I don't want you to know that I was screaming at my kids on the way to church this morning before delivering a message on God's love. So then how does someone who's hearing this message then go, okay, I can see that I do maybe need to open up myself a little bit here, right? But then, like, how do they make sure that while establishing boundaries, they don't find themselves on that island where there's a lot going on in their heart and they don't have anyone to talk with?
Yeah, so I think the question is, this is fresh off my sermon I preached on Sunday, is I think you need to be able to identify who are your safe spaces, who are the people in your life, and if you can't name them, then you're on an island.
Okay.
Like who are my safe landers? Like, now I'm gonna say this to anybody that's listening. I love Kevin Hu like a brother, right? And so I feel like even we have known each other long. If I needed a safe space just to be like blah, and unfortunately he's been on the other end of the phone when I'm just blood. I can do that, right? But I think doing an honest assessment of who are the people in your confidential circle, that your sacred circle, where it's like, if I need to cuss, cry, pray, or all of the above, I can reach out to these individuals, and they will hear me. They will be with me. They won't judge me. They won't shame me. If you can't name at least one individual, you are definitely on an island. And I would even encourage you to ask yourself, is it because these people don't exist, or because you have not made yourself vulnerable to these people? Because I do believe that God will not call us into the positions that we are in as pastors and not send support our way. sometimes we are just, for whatever reason, we just don't want to reach out. Maybe we don't want to be an additional burden on somebody. But in true friendship and true accountability, you're not a burden. You're my brother, right? Like this is where I signed up for this, right? I signed up to be good, bad, ugly. Like, let's bring it, right? And I want to rejoice with you when you're rejoicing, but I also want to weep with you when you're weeping. And I think it kind of diminishes the relationship when you deny us the opportunity to do that, right? So to answer your question, I think you need to do an assessment of like, who are the people that I can do that? And follow-up question is, do I do it, right? Mm-hmm. Like, do I let these people in? I know they're there, but do I let them in?
Hmm. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out what direction to go with that, because I'm trying to sit with that myself. If you can't think of anyone, then you're on an island. How about their friends maybe who are not in the church or not people who follow Jesus? Is that sufficient, would you say?
So let me tell you something. I literally just had this conversation with my wife. I have friends who are not faith leaders, who I can trust in degrees with certain things, right? But because of who they are and just their walk with Jesus, I know they're not in a position to give me godly counsel, but I do know if I just need a safe place to just kind of go cry, I'm there, right? Yeah. But I'm not expecting any godly counsel or wisdom from them. I'm just not. They'll be like, hey, come over, grab a beer. You're good until you're ready to go home. Mm-hmm. And so I think that there is some honesty that has to take place when you're doing an assessment about who are these people that I'm talking about. There are some people that I absolutely know that, like, if I'm not trying to talk to them about God talk, if I'm not trying to tell them that, like, I need you to be praying with me about this, or, I need you to discern with me about this, then they're going to take me to Jesus kicking and screaming, whether I want it or not. Yeah. There have been times that I have been absolutely angry with individuals. And, I've been transparent on this podcast that, I want to knock somebody straight out, right? And I'll call my friend and I'll call one of my friends and I'm waiting for him to be like, hey, bro, let me know where you want to go. We'll ride. And I'd be dang, we'll talk. And he'll be like, bro, let's pray. I'm just so sorry that happened to you. Let's pray. And I'm like, I don't want to pray with you right now. But that's actually what I need in that moment. Okay. It may be my subconscious and my spirit is telling me that's why I need to reach out to this person, because I know they're not going to tell me anything or lead me in a direction that's going to, be detrimental to me and ministry, my family, whatever. But I definitely have moments like that. I'm like, who told you to pray for me right now? Because I am not in a praying mood. But I think we have to be honest about the people that we're talking about. And so there may be degrees to which you share certain things with certain people, and that's all the way okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because as you were sharing, I was thinking about, I do have a few friends, one in particular that I know that I don't feel like I filter anything with. Not a believer, more cynical of life, I think, than I am even now at this age. And it does feel good to be able to share and vent and not feel like this person's going to preach at me back and try and fix my problems, right? So I think when I think of like safety and open spaces to just be myself and to throw whatever else I want out there, that's, one of the brothers I have in my life that I can do that with. But I think I am very also aware that I don't usually leave that space encouraged. Mm-hmm. And I think that to me is one of the biggest differences. And because it may just be what I want, right? I just want to just drop it all and just put it somewhere and just show all my emotions. But I think I'm very aware of what I need afterwards. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And usually if I walk away emptier or darker, sadder or angrier, those moments I usually say to myself, oh, I feel like I'm on an island. Mm-hmm. Like I need some counsel. I need some brothers. Even if they don't say a single word, I can feel their prayers like through the eyes as they're looking back at me. Yeah. Yeah. So that's how I would kind of like understand that, or that's how I do understand that. Is that kind of in line with what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Like
Okay.
sometimes, that whole idea of want and need is what do I need in this moment, right? And sometimes the want and the need is the same, right? It's like what I want to do is I need to unburden myself, and what I need to do is I need to do it in a safe space. And so here we go. Now, what I want to do is unburden myself, but what I need is godly counsel through this, or some people to be praying with me through this. Once you kind of weigh the wants and the needs, then it can help you determine who and how you move forward. And I've had to learn through personal relationships recently that sometimes what people want and what they need are not always in alignment. And just as a friend, I've had to back up and go, okay, you didn't come here for that. You really just wanted to speak your piece. And for me, that helped me guard my heart. So now I'm not walking around with resentment against you because you're not listening to my wise counsel from on high, right? Like you're not taking because my advice is very, very godly, very on point. But no, what you need right now is, and what you need and what you want is just an ear. You want an ear and a shoulder. Cool. And I asked you, what do you need in this moment? Tell me what you need in this moment. Man, I just need to talk. Okay, cool. Talk. I'm listening. And then I'll ask, well, do you want, I'm not right. And I've had people tell me I'm not ready for that. And I've had to check myself because I'm like, well, no, you need no, they told me what they need. They need an ear. If they wanted a mouth to give them advice or to pray for them, they would have asked for that. Or maybe they wouldn't. Or maybe I can ask. But if they say, no, I'm not ready for that right now, I have to honor that as well.
Yeah. All right. So as we kind of wrap this up, right? So I'm thinking for people in the audience right now who maybe for the first time in a long time just ask themselves that question, like, who are those people in my life? And they go, oh, I can't name them. What's the next step here? Are we going out to someone in our congregation then? Are we going out to an elder? Am I hitting up an old friend, another pastor?
I would say first, when you ask yourself, who are the people? And if you come back with, there is not one, I want to challenge that, because I believe, again, God would not send you to do this work, call you to this task, and not have somebody somewhere out there, right? And ask yourself the question, to what degree can I be fully authentic and share so that I'm not alone? Now, if there's not anybody out there, then your next step is to make it your business to find a safe space. Maybe that's a spiritual director. Maybe that's a therapist. Feel free to reach out to one of us here at Rooted. But everybody needs at least one somebody that they can share space with so that they don't find themselves alone on that island. And be intentional about it. Like, be very, very intentional about it. Because it can happen really easy for all of us, because nobody stays busier than a pastor, especially in their head, in their hearts, and with their feet. Like, we're all over the place. And so it can happen really easily. And you look up and one day's turned into 3 weeks, and 3 weeks has turned into several months. And you've been on that island. This whole conversation, I've been thinking about the movie Is it Castaway? Yeah. I've been thinking about you just pastor walking around with this soccer ball, and soccer ball ain't saying nothing to you, but you're thinking I'm good, and actually you're busy, but you're not good. You're functioning, but you're not good, and you've done a lot of great things on the island, but it's just you there, and God never designed any of His children to do life alone, to do ministry alone. So, do that assessment. Find yourself making it your business to ask God, who are the people? And then if you haven't been intentional about saying, hey, will you be my person? And ask them, like, hey, I recognize that if I'm not careful, I will find myself on this island. One, can you be somebody that I can check in with? And two, will you be intentional about checking in on me?
Yeah, both ways. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, Pastor Mack, thank you for your wisdom, your godly wisdom, your counsel, your invitation.
From the mount.
I'm grateful.
It was good talking with you, man.
Yeah, I'm grateful. Everyone else there, I hope you've been blessed by this conversation. As always, feedback, questions, whatever else you want to drop, feel free to go to our website, rootedministries.co. If you click on the podcast link, there's actually a form. You can reach out to us there, and we can interact with your feedback and comments in future episodes. Until next time, blessings to you all.
God bless.